Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classic as known classic. This is episode number 35, 82, Doubleshot, 34, 76. We have two X-Men trades. First up, it is Wolverine by Saladin, Ahmed, Volume 3. Mutant Protection. Collecting issues 13 to 16 of Wolverine, Volume 8. Yes. So, yeah, it collects those issues, plus also a short story from Logan, Black, White, and Blood, and Giant Size House. It contains a backup feature for that one, which that was set up for the opening issue, which is Logan, I'd say about in the early 1900s, receiving a ring from a gangster, and then in present day, he gives it to his granddaughter, who's got a white streak in her hair like she's Rogue. And then the very next, in the first issue of this book, is just Logan being a godfather for one issue, while being basically head of a family, for one single issue, and then pretty much for the next 3 issues, he's teaming with Silver Sable, and being hunted by Department H, who sends out Alpha Flight after him. By the way, issue 16 of this collection here, let me show the cover here. 16, I think it's like 15, I think it's 15. 15 here is a loose homage to a very famous cover. You look at the cover, like, the kind of cover looks familiar. Like, it's a loose homage to, of all covers, New Mutants number 87. Yep. Alpha Flight shows up. Mostly the original members. Some in many ways, like there's Marnia, Snowbird, Puck, and a woman. This mysterious woman who's here. We have, so we have a new Vindicator named Arcelot. Yeah, and she's a Jet McKay character. Yeah, and she actually previously appeared in 2 issues of X-Men, and then she appears here. Okay, so to answer the question of, like, you might think, okay, if she's Vindicator, where is the regular one? She is under house arrest. Well, actually, she's living in an illusion basically created by her husband. Yes. The purpose of it was to gain her trust. Which, don't know how, but... By the way, that was definitely the most recent appearance. It was actually in X-Men. Yep. The last time Wolverine actually was in the previous volume. During the really awesome Sabretooth War. Yeah, which I love that storyline. Yep, and yeah. So, and then of course they show up, and mostly the reason they're here because there's new Morlocks, a couple of whom were previously revived. So he's on the run from them, and basically, by the way, he's wearing the a costume I'm not really a fan of. This ugly costume. Yeah, I've never been a fan of this costume. I was for the yellow and blue. The yellow and brown just doesn't fit for me. So he fights Marna. By the way, here's something you might not know. Did you know that Namor does not know that his wife is actually alive? Yeah, he has no idea. She's been back now for, as of this year, about 15 years. And still does not know the fact his wife is alive and well. He has no idea. So, a lot of crazy stuff here. And of course we have this woman and this agent wants to take out Wolverine for reasons related to the early issues. Yeah, she last appeared in the early issues. And then they kind of do wrap the story up in the most weirdest way possible. So the stuff with Department H, and then, of course, basically, where we have basically is like, yeah, everything is all hunky-dory. They go basically separate ways. And basically, well, she had been Wolverine criticized her for daring around innocent civilians who did nothing. And then we cut to a UFC fight cage, or at least, underground fight cage, where The fighters are killed by the Antimite. Yeah, he is here just because basically the next Stork is going to deal with him. But really interesting issues. I enjoyed this stuff. I give this one roughly a 9 out of 10. Yes, of course, yes, this comes after the whole because between this and the last year we had the last Wolverine miniseries, which is for the Age of Illusion. I need to review that at some point. I've read it. It's actually really interesting, that crossover. But this was the first time I could think of since where basically all the books are either canceled or in case some books basically like push on pause for a few months. I think the last official this happened, well, this has happened a couple times with X books over the years. First being obviously Age Apocalypse. Wolverine's title was put on hiatus for that crossover, replaced with the first volume of Weapon X. The second volume was published in the 2000s, and third volume was published, which was written by Greg Pak. That was published in the late 2010s, basically in the last decade. Really fun book, that one. But this was the second time, basically, Wolverine had ever been hiatus because of a alternate reality crossover. The last one, before Age of Evolution, it was Age of X. But unlike in the case of Age Apocalypse, Age of X did not put the main series that it was. It will last just a couple months. I think it was mostly crossover with X-Men Legacy and I think New Mutants. But it didn't put the titles on hiatus for a couple months. Still published, no problem. Yeah, at least that in the case of X-Men, this has worked out fine for them. Age of Evolution did put out some really cool stuff. Yeah, we had the Shadows of Tomorrow stuff. Now, when I saw this book came back, I was quite happy. Given the fact the book was going really good for Wolverine on the Saladin Ahmed. But surprisingly, books like Storm, Psylocke, Laura McKinley Wolverine, those books were axed. Though in the case of Laura McKinley Wolverine, they relaunched her title under the title of Generation X-23. Wolverine got axed, not relaunched on anything. Storm got basically a mini-series after Age of X. Magic had an ongoing series, and her title got axed and relaunched as a mini-series as Magic and Colossus. X-Force ended, but it came back recently under Inglorious X-Force. X-Factor ended well before Age of Evolution happened. That hasn't come back, and that book ending probably was a good move on the part of Marvel because it wasn't that good. It had some good ideas with it, but they probably had to end it purely because it was not a big seller. One book that ended, now I think in the case of NYX, that was another book that canceled. That one the writers did know was going to cancel. In the case of X-Force, according to what I've heard, apparently Jeffrey Thorne, who wrote the previous line for X-Force, he had no idea that his book was ending. He had no idea the book was going to cancel. He basically was completely taken aback by the fact that his book got canceled. And as of currently, he hasn't any books of Marvel currently that I've seen recently. Not really, no. And as of recently, Saladin Ahmed, this is, I think, the only book he's putting out from Marvel right now. Yes, I believe so. I had to look it up because I think this might be the only title he's putting out right now. Well, he's doing the Bishop miniseries. Yes, he's doing that. There is Alien King Killer. He's doing that. Basically, he's doing 2 miniseries, but ongoing wise, yeah, he's doing 1. Oh, I forgot to mention the black and white stuff. It is just it's basically just Wolverine at a bar in the 70s. Of course, he'd be there in the 70s. Plus 2-page spreadsheet on the side. It just there's a murder and Wolverine solves up pretty quickly. Also, he basically they attempt to frame him because it's called Blood because the book is covered in blood. Not literally, of course, but there's lots of blood in the story. It's quite interesting. I'm guessing the reason why they included it because Saladin Ahmed wrote it. Yeah, that's the only reason I think they included it. That's the only reason I can think of why it's here. Um, in the case of this volume so far, I am really, like I said, I really enjoy this volume. It has some really cool ideas. It definitely feels like a Wolverine title. It definitely was what the thing publishes. Yeah. By the way, in the previous trade, he killed Mastermind, still dead. Alright, so next up we have another X-Men. We have X-Men Savage Land. Yep. This was a 5-issue miniseries written by Tim Seeley and artwork by Zamaya Sakito Levia, who does 1 through 3 and 5. Bon Randall does issue 4. So, this is pretty much Rogue's Savage Land adventure. And this took place between her off time between 260 and 274. And of course they threw in that trade. That's why the trade is a little thick here. The trade itself was only like $9.99. This was, here's something surprising for you. This was $15.99 for this trade. I'm like, a Wolverine trade that cheap? I was quite surprised by it. Probably because it contains 4 issues. Yeah, I'd say of the 3 volumes released so far, this is the cheapest trade I've come across. Yeah, and you think about this. Rogue in the Savage Land, and it contains issues from, it reprints issues from Kenny X-Men. Tim Seeley writes it. Why isn't Chris Clem writing it? Good question. Because previously we have these, like, this is one of these, like, untold film, this is like a gap filler miniseries, the film gaps people's runs. And Claremont's on a few of these, and there's one that he should have been writing, but instead they had a different writer called X-Men Outback, which from what I can tell, it's going to be telling some untold stuff related to when X-Men were based out of Australia. Yes, and instead of having Chris Claremont write it, the writer who actually originally wrote that period of time, no, it is somebody else. So, it is by far so baffling. Of course, the whole thing, Rogue has basically got her costume damage, runs Magneto. There's also Zelinda, who was an alleged daughter of Magneto. He, of course, does not acknowledge her as basically his daughter. I gotta admit, the artist basically draws to be drop dead gorgeous. And she's working with Brainchild of the Savage Mutates. The Mutates were people who were mutated by, I think it was Magneto. Oh no. I guess basically I'm going to have to basically find this out because this is so I had to look at my phone here. So Outback, when my phone comes up here, is being written by Steve Orlando. And you would think, this is a Chris Claremont era book. He should be writing this. Nope. Yeah. And I tend to wonder, though, of why the heck Marvel did that for. Like, an obvious book that probably should be written by Chris Claremont. Nope. Steve Orlando. And, of course, also, because Savage Land think, oh, does Ka-Zar here? Yes, he does. He's right there in the cover. With Zabu, because it's Savage Land. Of course, basically, appear here. This book was a lot of fun. And, of course, there's also flashbacks to basically the hallucination of Miss Marvel, well, the Carol Danvers Miss Marvel, when she was dead. Well, actually, no, when she was dead. She was in a coma. Yes, she fell in a coma. The reason why she fell in a coma was because of it was because Rogue held on to her head too long when she was absorbing her powers, being ordered to by Mystique of all people, and she fell in a coma. That didn't last very long. This is also referenced the X-Men animated series with this, and this happened in number 10 of Avengers, Rogue's debut. And the thing is, between the two of them, oh good. Let's see here. Here we go. Yep. So yeah, between the two of them, Captain Marvel herself, Carol Danvers, has put the incident behind her. She is no longer bothered by it at all. No. No, she is not. And they have kind of buried the hatch over this. It was all Mystique basically forcing her to do it, so yeah, overall, basically, the book itself was a lot of fun. Nothing against Tim Seeley, but this is the type of stuff that should be done by the original writer. If you want to do Gavin Peter David stuff now, it's going to have done by a different writer. At least there's an excuse for that. This, maybe he was approached to do this, but he said no. Yeah, I'm sure he probably was approached, but he probably said no. Probably because basically he has done a few of these already. I think he's doing I believe he's doing a Gambit miniseries. Yes, I believe he is. So, what he's done lately for Marvel? Well, he did an extended cut of God Loves Man Kills. He did a Gambit miniseries, which I have previously reviewed, really good. This one took place. This took place during the events depicted in X-Men 267. There is one for Extreme X-Men, which I think was a continuation of his run from Extreme X-Men. Yes, pretty much that's what it is. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I probably will soon. Manageable Nights, he did that one. That was awesome. That was basically picking up right where Uncanny X-Men 268 left off. Yeah, kind of interesting the fact he did this one. Let's see. There was also Wolverine Deep Cut. Another miniseries that tells an untold story from the events of 246, what Wolverine was up to. There is a Wolverine Kitty Pryde miniseries that he worked on. Yep. And it says that it takes place between Kitty Pryde Wolverine number 6 and Uncanny X-Men 192. There was also Wolverine by Chris Claremont, which was a one-shot he did recently. It's just another Wolverine story for him. Then you have the Gambit Wanted miniseries, which I think this one is supposed to be what Gambit is up to prior to joining the X-Men. That's what I've heard anyways. But this book, a lot of fun. I give this book a 10 out of 10. Tim still did a good job, but kind of wish Claremont would be the one writing this one. But it's a minor thing. But X-Men Outback, this miniseries out right now, this should work by Chris Claremont. Unless, of course, Elena did research. But who knows? Okay, so that's pretty much it for the video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, to notifications. So next up, basically, we have is, well, Skeletonite to Another World. Okay, thanks you. Bye.